Hey, Patreons. Welcome back to the Spotlight. This is our segment of the show where we meet creators and creatives in the genre world and we get to know them. I'm joined as always by Peter Stein, almost always by Peter Stein, my regular man on Code 47. But we have the pleasure of talking tonight with Mr. Greg Cox. Greg's, it is so great to meet you.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, Greg, you are a heritage writer of Star Trek novels, including the exceptional Eugenics Wars, Volume 1 and 2, the Q Continuum, Black Shore. You did anthologies like Tales of the Dominion War, which is a favorite of mine, some work with the Star Trek Enterprise logs, the Khan novel, and I could just go on and on and on. And I'm I'm sure you get tired of hearing it, but yeah, let's get it rolling. So a big chunk of what you've done is obviously Star Trek based. Give us your Star Trek origin story. What made you a fan? When did you get into it, and how?
Well, honestly, as I always say, I honestly cannot remember when I was not a Star Trek fan.
I got
At
it.
the risk of showing my age, I have dim memories of my father letting me stay up past my bedtime to watch Star Trek during its original run on NBC. And of course, the syndicated reruns were running in the background of my entire childhood,
Mhm.
adolescence, college years, forever. Um, and indeed, by the time I didn't discover organized Star Trek fandom until college, where in fact, me and pretty much my entire college science fiction club took a road trip to Seattle from our university, which was about 100 miles, to go see the motion picture on opening night.
Oh wow,
So yeah,
That's impressive.
I am first generation Trekkie. I grew up on TOS. Like I said, I discovered organized fandom in time for the movie era to begin,
gotcha.
and
Wow.
eventually, like I said, at this point, you said legacy. It's funny to realize, yes, at this point, I'm one of the Star Trek veterans. I have been writing
Yes.
Star Trek novels pretty regularly for 30 plus years now.
Wow.
Probably not quite half my life.
Wow.
So
Steeped in Trek. That's funny. Peter and I have been doing a Star Trek podcast for almost 4 years now together. So I'm sure we'll get to the point where we'll be like, I've been doing this for a quarter of my life talking about Star Trek, and people are still tuning in. We're thrilled to have the opportunity to do it, and then to have the chance to meet folks like you. So
yeah,
yeah, that's awesome.
the
Yeah,
funny thing I run into these days is I run into people at conventions, and it's great. They go, "Oh my God, Star Trek! I love Star Trek. Oh, I practically grew up on Voyager." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm old." You know?
oh, us too.
Yeah.
Us too. I mean,
Yeah.
even some people that we've had guests with us on our show, Code 47, are 10, 15 years younger than us. Peter is 15 years younger than I am. So I get people more of his age bracket like, yeah, it was my first memory was watching Enterprise or something. I'm like, oh my God, I was out of college.
Yeah.
I had a kid at that point.
That is the story of my life in terms of online these days. It's like, "Oh wow, Wrath of Khan! I saw that when I was 8." I'm like, "Oh wow, I was in college." You know?
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Yeah,
That's
I
okay.
saw it
wild.
when I was younger than that because it was already out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Peter, please.
Speaking of Wrath of Khan,
Yeah.
a,
Segue.
a character that you've come back to several times is the aforementioned megalomaniacal Khan Noonien Singh. Would you be able to maybe talk about what drew you to that character, since you've written books with him 3 times at least?
Three
And
books
what
and a
did it
short
take to
story at
like
this point.
flesh out the crazy that is Khan?
Well, on one hand, honestly, that's my all-time favorite Star Trek movie. It is still my all-time favorite Star Trek movie, so that's great. Um, Although, honestly, the Khan trilogy ended up happening kind of by accident.
Hmm.
Um, I had written a previous book, Star Trek novel, Assignment Eternity, involving Gary Seven and
Yeah.
Rosa Lincoln and Isis. And at the end of that episode, that novel, I threw in a little Easter egg to the effect of, "Fascinating, Captain. According to our historical records, Gary Seven and Roberta were instrumental in the downfall of Khan Noonien Singh during the eugenics wars. And I swear to God, I was not setting anything up. I thought that was just a nice little. It dawned on me that
Yeah.
Gary Seven and Khan were kind of contemporaries. So I thought that was a cute little punchline to that novel. I get a phone call from my editor, John Ordover, saying, "Greg, you have to write that book."
Oh,
I
okay.
swear to God, I was not setting that up. I was just kind of
No.
thinking it'd be kind of a nice, Spock
Yeah.
checking the historical records and
Yeah.
fascinating captain. They were instrumental in overthrowing Khan Noonien Singh during the infamous eugenics wars. And before I knew it, years had gone by. I'd written an entire trilogy about Khan, which to this day, honestly, in all honesty and all humility, are probably the books I'm best known for. I am
Right.
resigned to the fact that I joke that, when I finally depart this mortal coil, my obituary will say, Greg Cox, author of the Khan novels and many other fine Star Trek novels. That,
Other
at least
fine books.
when I'm bopping around online, it's always, oh my God, are you the guy who wrote the Khan novels? Not, are you the guy who wrote Dragon's Honor? Or are you the guy who wrote the Black Shore? It's the Khan books, But again, those happened by accident. And I give credit to my editor, John Ordover, who saw the seed of those when I kind of threw that in as a throwaway Easter egg. And he was like, oh, no, Greg, you got to write those books. And
Right.
before I knew it, it was a trilogy.
Yeah. Dragon's Honor is actually one of the books that I still have from that run on my shelf.
I think that was my very second Star Trek novel.
Yeah.
And that was a collaboration with Kiz Johnson. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, dovetailing a little bit away from talking about Star Trek, you've taken on the big two in the comic books world, Marvel and DC.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm a Marvel zombie, hands down. And it was funny. We recently talked to Michael Jan Friedman, who wrote all of the TNG first run for DC. Those were and that run of Star Trek is the only DC comics that I have ever followed. But otherwise, I'm a Marvel guy. I started with Star Wars before I got to superheroes, and I've always been a comics guy. To this day, I still read. Which company did you have a preference for working with? Like, which was a better experience? Was it kind of the same? I mean, talk to me about that.
Okay, well, to put a context, yeah, I have written novels based on both Marvel and DC properties. Oddly enough, I've never actually written a comic book. It's always been tie-in novels, movie novelizations, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't say there's been much of a difference, especially I'm reluctant to make any sweeping statements because, again, we're talking, not to belabor the fact, a long span of time. So,
right.
Whatever anecdotes I might have about working with Marvel back in the 90s may not have anything to do with working with Marvel, nowadays, and DC likewise. But no, I grew up on both of them. Generationally, it was sort of a thing. When I was younger, I preferred DC to Marvel. Mm-hmm. And then when I hit my teen years, suddenly Marvel and all the storylines and the angst appealed to me, and I pretty much gave up on DC and was a full-blown Marvel zombie during my teenage years.
Yeah.
And then probably around college age, just things started getting interesting at DC again. Crisis on Infinite Earths, John Byrne's Superman, George Perez's Marvel Wolfman's. Yeah. I kind of sampling them again, and Teen Titans. And nowadays I go back and forth, and I kind of have a foot in. But yeah, at that point I I went from being sort of exclusively a DC kid to being a Marvel Comics teenager to nowadays I'm eclectic. And I've enjoyed working with both of them and got to, write a lot of my favorite characters. Both.
Gotcha. So
the movie versions and both from the comic book versions.
You're still reading then? So you still pick up comics, read online, or go to the comic shop, that kind of thing. Trade paperbacks.
Comic book. We've got a comic book store 2 blocks away from us here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's called the Comic Store. And I'm not as religious as I used to be about buying. Trying to follow every part of the latest 75-part miniseries, but I put in the door, and I also pick up a lot of the independent stuff these days because there's fun stuff like the Elvira comics and the new Universal Monster comics and everything. So yeah, and the new Conan stuff coming from Titan is cool,
Yeah.
And of course, Conan was a Marvel property back when I was a teenager. So
right. kind of like Rom Space Knight. It was Marvel. It left, and now it's back again.
Yeah.
So the wonderful world of licensing. I've been following some of the IDW Star Trek comics in the last 20 years. Right now, they're on their second volume of Lower Decks, which is a stitch. I mean, because it's written like the cartoon, so
And,
it's very silly.
and yeah, Star Trek is a classic example of a franchise that, comic book wise, has drifted from Gold Key to DC to Marvel to DC back again to
Right,
Malibu to I
right,
probably can't do the entire litany from memory, but it's
right.
who has the Star Trek license, this week. Although
Right.
IDW at this point has had a good long stint, They
About 20 years, yeah, 20,
yeah,
20,
I
almost
say
25
that,
years.
but again, yeah, I don't want to slight IDW by saying, oh, they're the new kid in town because they've been, you know,
Right. Right,
being the
right,
thing
right.
going now for quite some time. But yeah,
No doubt. That's a good deal. Peter.
Um, we've touched on the fact that you've written in a plethora of franchises, like Star Trek, DC, Marvel. I even saw that you wrote in one of my favorites, Farscape, which was kind of fun. But you're dealing with characters that like already exist. They usually have pretty well-known characterizations, especially when you're dealing with like uh, the televisions or the films, because everyone's got like a specific actor in their head or whatever. So how do you go about like getting into the characters' heads or like figuring out what makes them tick to make them still feel like that character when you put them on paper?
it depends a little bit. Now, some of the stuff, obviously, like, they're bred into my bones. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, Spock, Kirk, McCoy, I don't need to go do research to figure out who are these people. I've known who these people
right.
were since I was 6. Um,
Same. Yeah.
but I also tend to do immersion. I will sit down if I'm writing. I wrote a novel a while back that involved Seven of Nine, and who I had never written before. And yeah, at that point I had not watched Voyager for a few years. I actually sat down and binge watched a bunch of 7 of 9 centric Voyager episodes just to try to, oh, right, get her voice, capture her voice. And at the risk again of patting myself on my back, I think one talent I do have as a tie-in writer is I'm a fairly good whatever literary mimic, and I can pick up the voices of the characters. And okay, you never, that's important in tie-ins. You want Riker to sound like Riker.
Right.
Yeah.
You want Chekhov to sound like Chekhov. You want, Xena to sound like Xena, Buffy to sound like Buffy. For whatever reason, like I said, immersion helps. And sometimes if it's a franchise, maybe it's a new show, like The Librarians or Leverage, I will, have to sit down and seriously binge watch,
Hmm.
I have a funny story about that. When I was contacted about writing a Leverage novel, the editor, Ginger Buchanan, asked me, so Greg, are you a Leverage fan? And I could have bullshitted her and said, oh,
Oh yeah,
absolutely. In
absolutely.
fact, I had never seen Leverage. Well, what I told her is, I said, no, but I can be. and, and sure enough, I then went out and, got the box sets, binge watched the first 2 seasons, and, for a couple of weeks, and oh, okay, now I know these characters. I got this. I see where this works. And unfortunately, I loved the show. It was great. It was not like, oh my god, this is torture. No, it was. Oh, this is a delightful show. And I spent some time. I watched the episodes. I went to the websites. I read the fan pages. This is what people like about it. This is how the show clicks. I see. Okay, I understand Leverage now, and I wrote a Leverage novel, and it was well received. But yeah, that was one I mentioned where I was not burned in my. Again, when I started doing CSI books, I think I'd seen it intermittently, but thank God CSI at that point was like on TNT or something,
Right.
24 times a day. It was not hard to.
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit here and binge watch, and yeah, you do your homework, and okay, now I know who these people are, and I know how the show works, and I've got the rhythm down. So
Yeah, it's probably even easier in the age of streaming because you can be like, all right, well, it's all on Netflix, and then you don't have to do any work to try to find it.
exactly, I remember once I got requested by Star Trek to do a story about Robert April, who at that point had appeared in one episode of TA of the animated
Right.
series,
Yep.
which at that point, this was back in the 90s, this was pre-streaming, was not easy to find.
Right.
I remember spending a long weekend pounding the pavement in New York City, trying to find a used VHS copy of the counterclock incident.
Oh,
And it
geez.
took me about 2 days before finally in a mom and pop video store in the East Village, oh thank God, I found a copy of this episode.
Oh my gosh.
And
Oh,
yeah,
so you
these days I would just go on Paramount Plus and boom.
yeah. So you got no kind of support from your publisher to help out with that kind of thing. They're like, you know what, make it happen.
I don't know. I didn't try. I mean, it
Oh.
was. I suppose if it was desperate, if I called them up, and I could have gone on the phone and please FedEx me a copy of the script or something. They could have made something happy. But one tries not to abuse the privilege. And so, like I said, I spent a weekend walking around trying to find a copy of the counterclock incident.
Right.
And you couldn't
Adventure.
just stream it, and you couldn't just go
Yeah.
on Amazon and
Right.
have them send you a
Yeah, you
box
couldn't
set.
have the DVDs here in 2 days or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Nowadays,
but walking around, pounding the pavement in New York City, going in and out of video stores, but that's an adventure in itself,
Hey, Secret Friends Unite, let me tell you about Zencastr. We use them for our show, and now they're supporting us. Zencastr is now the all-in-one solution making podcasting easy. It's the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. Provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content, all from one dashboard. Being a creator has never been easier. And we chose Zencastr because of the ease of use, high quality output, and it makes it super easy for our guests to come on. We had multiple solutions we tried before, and Zencastr has just been the best fit for us. Why Zencastr? It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio-quality sounds and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. Have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. So if you're interested in making an easy, high-quality podcast just with the click of a browser button, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SFU1. You'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Now back to the show.
Fond memories, something kind of fun to do, right?
Yeah, the hunt is on, but
The hunt is on. Yeah,
really near the end there.
I'm an action figure collector. You can see some of it behind me, but the bulk of it is in front of me. And hunting is something that I do not only for myself, but other friends of mine. They'd be like, hey, who's on the look for this thing? And so I'd go into different stores and stuff. So I definitely know the joy of it. So that's cool. Still talking about novelizations and different franchises. You mentioned Buffy. Terminator is another one you've touched. Godzilla is one that you've touched. Of all of the adaptations that you can kind of muster up in your head, what's one that you really feel like you got to sink your teeth into, like it really stands out as unusual or challenging or fun or tell me.
Well, I have fond memories of the Underworld franchise. You remember Underworld, the horror series, the vampires,
right.
icons. Underworld was a big part of my life for a few years. I wrote the novelizations of the first 3 movies and a standalone tie-in novel inserted between the movies. So yeah, I wrote 4 Underworld books. So that was, I part of me, among my many enthusiasms, I'm a gothic horror fan. I love, vampires and werewolves. That's how I got the gig. And so, yeah, Underworld, and the Underworld people were a very pleasure to work with. They invited me to the red carpet premiere at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood, which is not typical.
Wow.
I think maybe they didn't know they weren't supposed to do that. Okay.
I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that.
No, they invited me. I'm actually still Facebook friends with at least one of the cast members,
Yeah. That's awesome.
So it was cool, Underworld was a great deal. And there was a whole lot of stuff to flesh out because you had this 500-year history of the war between the Lycans and the vampires. My
Yeah.
editor in that book still teases me about turning in a 400-page movie novelization. I just kind of got carried away.
Oh my gosh,
I can say
that's
how I
wild.
got that gig was, again, it was the same. It was John Ordover, who was the editor who actually first recruited me to write Star Trek novels. And his
Mhm.
idea was to, hey, Greg, you have to write the Khan trilogy. I've
Yeah.
known John for years. We were assistant editors at Tor Books together. And
Fun.
he knows that I'm a big vampire werewolf guy. So when Pocket Books got their license to do Underworld books, he was like, hey, Greg, you're into vampires and werewolves, right? Yeah. How would you like to write a movie novelization? Okay, great, bang. And, when I knew it, 4 books later, I was, the Underworld guy,
Oh my goodness, you got that vampire werewolf reputation. My
Yeah,
goodness,
that's a good one.
cool, good deal,
Well, believe it or
awesome.
not, quick digression. My
Please.
very first book I ever wrote or sold was a nonfiction book on the history of vampire literature,
Oh,
which I sold to a small academic press. Made no
oh my
money
gosh,
whatsoever. But but yeah,
is
no,
it?
I was the vampire guy. I wrote a book on the history of vampire
Oh
fiction.
wow.
So
Does it still exist? Is it still out there digitally or even in print somewhere? Or is it?
not
Who knows?
digitally. You could probably find it on eBay. The company has long since gone out of business. And
Yeah.
at this point, it is like nearly 40 years out of date. I think
Oh,
it
wow.
covered like the history of vampire literature up to about 1987, and then since then, oh God, you've had True Blood and Buffy and,
It's
Yeah,
Twilight.
there's a
yeah,
lot of vampire stuff since
yeah.
then.
Yeah,
Vampires.
occasionally I remember there were inquiries about, hey, Greg, would you like to update the book? And I was like, oh, good God, that would be a major, the amount of vampire fiction out there had exploded exponentially. And
Right.
by then
That'd
I
be
had a
a
life and
Herculean
job. And
task.
Yeah. Oh my goodness,
so,
that's wild.
and
Awesome.
5 million paranormal vampire romances over in the romance section, and
Oh
YA
boy.
vampire novels.
Twilight notwithstanding. Please, notwithstanding.
So yeah, but like it all connects. Then you start finding, like I said, I was the vampire guy. I did Star Trek, and then when Pocket Books got the rights to do the Underworld books, well, how about Greg? He does media tie-ins, and he's a vampire guy. So boom.
I absolutely remember just to piggyback off your side quest, the very first TOS novel I read, and this would have been in the late 80s, had to do with something vampire related, and I cannot remember what the name of
Bloodthirst
the
by
book.
J.M. Dillard, I'm guessing.
Thank you. Yeah, I read it probably when I was in 6th grade. And I just remember, a little bit bits and pieces, but I definitely remember the vampiristic elements of it. So that's now I feel like I got to go back and read it because you kind of sparked my interest.
I confess I'm still a little jealous that J.M. Dillard beat me to the vampire Star Trek thing. Okay.
Gotcha. Did you ever do a Star Trek vampire element in any of the books that you did?
Honestly, The Black Shore, which was my Voyager novel,
Okay.
if you look at it carefully, I didn't use the V word, but that's a vampire novel in Star Trek Drag. Okay.
Now I'm
It, given away
curious.
by the scene where at one point B'Elanna drives a sharp-pointed object through a evil energy-sucking evil energy-sucking alien's chest.
Right, an alien.
Yeah, I didn't use the V
Aliens.
word, but there are vampire elements in the Black Shore,
Oh my gosh,
That's
that is so
hysterically
funny.
which
awesome.
I believe
Oh
was
my
actually my
goodness.
first solo. Yeah, it was my first solo Star Trek novel after doing 2 collaborations.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Gotcha. Cool. All right, Peter.
We've talked about the fact that you've done a lot of film novelizations.
Ooh,
So I was just wondering when it comes to the writing process for that, since like you've got like the whole script, you've seen the film most of the time, I would imagine, if
never.
as long as it's out. But when you're writing that, how does that compare to like writing a normal novel? Because you take time and fill in the gaps of things like thought processes of characters or scenes that maybe that don't exist because they need to like fill in gaps or whatever. So how do you go about that? Like how is it different?
But typically, I am working from an early version of the script, plus
Yep, that makes sense.
whatever stills or pre-production artwork I can pry out of the studio. I don't see the movie first. I'm writing the book while the movie is being filmed so that the book can land at the same time with the movie.
Right,
I
right.
stress this because actually this surprises people that, wait, you haven't seen? No, I see the movie when it opens at the multiplex the same day everybody else does.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If I'm lucky, maybe I've seen the trailer. I think once they
Mm.
sent me an advanced copy of the trailer in advance. But no, which explains why you'll never see a novelization, by the way, that is identical to the movie. I get these notes, you left out the best part. It wasn't in the script. It
Right.
was ad-libbed, or where did that
Right.
scene come from? Well, that was in the script, but it got cut out, you know. So yeah, I mean, the first time I see the movie, I'm not watching the movie as a audience member. I'm sitting going, oh, that's what that looks like. Oh, I got that right. Oh, I got that very wrong. No one told me that character was a woman. Wait, they changed the ending. Oh, wait, they cut out the, whatever scene,
Yeah.
Where's the train crash scene, Yeah.
I thought it'd be like if they took the train crash out of The Fugitive, right?
They shot a new ending. Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes I should mention that, like I said, I'm working from an earlier version script. It varies. Sometimes I may get alerted, okay, Greg, we've cut this scene out. Hey, Greg, we're faxing you some new pages. I do remember once getting a call, bad news, Greg, they've shot a new ending. We're faxing you the new script pages. Can you get us the new ending by Monday?
On a Sunday, right?
Yeah. But the challenge is, like I said, taking a 120-page script and fleshing it out into a 300-page novel. And what I do is, like I said, look for things I can go in and flesh out and expand on, and getting into the characters' heads. The one thing I figured, I can't compete with the movies in terms of the visuals and the soundtrack. So what I can do, what a book does, is try to get tight into the characters' heads and what are they and seeing things through the eyes of the characters. In fact, one of the first things I do is, after I read the whole script, I go through with Post-its and figure out who the point of view character is in any given scene. Oh, this scene I should tell from Alfred's point of view. This scene should be from Catwoman's point of view. This scene should be from Bruce's. And figure out who the point of view character is. And also, like I said, look for minor characters I can flesh out. You tend to have a little more latitude to flesh out, policeman number 3, because obviously I have to give these characters names, because you can't read a novel where suddenly policeman number 3 walks onto.
Yeah.
And the challenge also is just trying to figure out what things look like. And scripts are mostly dialogue and action. They don't really talk about what things look like, because that's not the screenwriter's job. Even sometimes the fight scenes are kind of sketched out, because that's not the screenwriter's job. That's the fight choreographer's job. But I'll get descriptions where, she walks into a room and all heads turn. Well, what is she wearing? I have no idea. And I'm like, please send me some art from the ballroom scene,
Yeah, right.
Or I remember once I was doing a book, there was a big fight scene, and the script was simply, she kicks their asses. Well, thanks a lot. I got to get 10 pages out of this.
Oh, no.
That seems very much like, the story from The Lord of the Rings, where it's like they walk down the stairs and then we get that whole thing with the collapsing stairs.
Well,
it feels kind of like that.
I remember on Godzilla. Godzilla, I know what he looks like. I've known what Godzilla looks like since I was 6 again. But the Mutos, who were the other monsters, the massive underground terrestrial organisms who were new to that movie. I was on the phone pleading, begging, please send me some art of the pictures of the Mutos, because again, they were not described in detail in the script. Fangs, claws, big, horrible.
Yeah.
Please. I try not to abuse the privilege of calling and bugging the movie people who are busy making their movie, but occasionally I will make up a list of, okay, I really, really need to know what the Mutos look like. Can you please send me whatever you have? Because I have not seen the movie. I remember also Man of Steel. Again, I know what a major urban metropolis looks like. I kind of know what a farm in Kansas looks like. But since they completely reinvented Krypton in that movie, I couldn't use the old Silver Age Krypton. I couldn't use the Ice Palace from the Christopher. There was a lot of phone calls. Please tell me what a Kryptonian birthing chamber looks like. Send me some art, please. So yeah, those are the challenges, because I like to describe the job as writing a 300-page description of a movie I haven't seen yet.
That's
And
fair.
it's the
Yeah.
visuals that tend to be missing from the script, and that's where
Yeah.
I whine and call and plead, and this gets tricky
Please help me.
because, and I'm not bashing the studios. The one thing I've noticed over the last umpteen years of doing novelizations, the security keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter,
Right.
and the
Because of the
secrecy.
internet. Yeah.
And I don't,
internet,
again, I do not begrudge the theater. This is, the internet. Spoilers have become a cottage industry, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, the days when they would just take the script for Daredevil, pop it in the mail to me, and with a stack of photos are over. Now it's
Yeah.
like, files have to be encrypted, and
It's a
everything is
secure
watermarked, and it's
Dropbox.
all
Yeah.
security, and trying to, hi, I'm writing the book. You have to tell me what the monsters look like.
Yeah.
You have to tell me the ending.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. That's wild.
I didn't know that they didn't give you all that much information. I
Yeah.
figured that it was before the film came out, so you wouldn't see a lot. But
Yeah,
Right.
knowing
Right.
that like
If
they
I'm
didn't
lucky,
give
I'd
you
see
even
a
like
trailer.
concept art is a little like, ugh.
Yeah. That's tough.
I will tell you, Man of Steel was actually kind of fun. Man of Steel, I actually flew out to Burbank because they would not let the script out of their possession. I had to go out to Burbank and read it on the Warner Brothers lot.
Oh wow.
But and take copious notes. And same thing with Dark Knight Rises. Oh my God, Dark Knight Rises, I could go on for an hour. The D-Day, and again, I do not begrudge this. I'm not complaining about Warner Brothers. It was a high-profile movie. There were
Oh yeah.
5 million websites wanting to spoil that movie. The secrecy surrounding that script for The Dark Knight Rises, the D-Day invasion was not guarded. Again, I had to fly all the way out to Burbank, read the script. And even there, if I got up and had lunch, I would they would bring me the script in the morning. Oh, I'm going to go get lunch now. I would give it to the nice person who would go and put it in the unbreakable Warner Brothers vault until I came back and then bring it back to me. All files had to be encrypted. And of course, you've got the code names for all the scripts. The scripts are all,
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
Godzilla was codenamed Nautilus, and all the scripts were labeled Nautilus.
Mhm.
But yeah, so the security has gotten much, much tighter,
Yeah.
which makes it
Yeah.
a little harder to pry the, But oh yeah, Man of Steel was cool. They had a room set up. I'm not joking. They called it the Fortress of Solitude, where they had a lot of the production art and the props and costumes all set up on display for licensors, not just for me, but for the action fiction people, the
Yeah.
T-shirt people. And I was told, hi, we can give you a half an hour in the Fortress of Solitude, and I can go in and take copious notes and look at the scripts and props and a lot of the Kryptonian weapons and ray guns, and it was very cool.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pre-production art, which was framed on the walls, but I wasn't allowed to take any of it off the premises. And I wasn't allowed to have any of the art off the premises.
Oh my
I
gosh.
could go in and look at it, but nothing leaves the Fortress of Solitude.
Oh my gosh, that is so crazy.
Goodness.
Well, one last question
Mhm.
before we wrap things up, and this has been just absolutely incredible. We could talk to you for hours because you are a great source of totally awesome stories. But what's on the docket right now? What are you working on right now?
Well, okay, I got to be a little discreet here. I got
Yeah,
a couple
I was gonna say, if you
projects
could
in
tell
the
us.
works. I'm not sure I can always announce them because NDAs, confidentiality.
Understood.
I'm working on another media tie-in novel now, which I hope to get finished by March.
Hmm.
And I have also recently sold my first original novel. Believe it or not,
Oh,
after
great.
like 30, it took me 65 years. But after years of writing media tie-in novels and re-novelizations and being lucky enough to do all this, I finally checked another item off my bucket list, and I wrote a big 130,000 word horror novel, which should be
Wow.
coming out in 2026.
Oh, very
Where we
exciting.
stand now is I'm waiting for notes back from the editor, and then I will do another revisions. But yeah, I'm excited about it. Not that I'm not proud of writing all the movie novelizations and the Star
Oh,
Trek books.
absolutely. No, I totally understand.
And say I would be remiss if I did not mention that I had a new Star Trek book come out in July.
I have
Lost Eternity.
I have been reading it because I am on the advanced list from the publisher. So I have been reading it, but I've also been balancing 3 other novels they sent me. But those 3 are all going on the shelf, and I'm going to finish yours now that we've
And
had this great conversation.
came out, I feel obliged to point out that it came out just last week, is a new hardcover Star Trek
Yes.
collection from.
I I saw that on Trek movie.
Yes,
I did.
and I
Yeah.
actually I have a story in this book. It's a story about Cyrano Jones, the guy from the
Oh
Trouble.
no.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm
And that's something you can pick up, I assume, in a bookstore, or maybe it's digital as well.
not digital. I think it's
Okay.
at this point strictly hardcover, but it was
Okay.
published December 10th. And I'm very
Okay.
amused that there's also a story in here by Walter Koenig.
Oh, right,
So
right.
actually sharing a cover and a byline with Walter Koenig is a bucket list item I didn't even know I had. It was
Wow.
great to be
Yeah.
sharing a table of contents with him. Okay.
That's
That
awesome.
is awesome. Yeah, the novel that you showed, and I'm going to flub the Here to Eternity, the one that you just
Lost
showed
to
us.
Eternity.
Lost to Eternity. I absolutely loved it because your you know, you have the different time periods being told in. One of the characters is a podcaster in current time, so that's just I love
Right.
it. I love it. So I'm going to jump back into finishing that novel. When I finish it, I'll send you an email. I absolutely will, because it's very, very, very cool. Well, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for making the time for this.
Oh no! Like I said, I'm glad it's fun. You spend all this time writing about these books, and you want to talk about it. I have to watch myself because, like I said, I've got lots of anecdotes because I've written for
Oh,
lots of franchises.
Oh
You know?
my
Yeah.
goodness, this is great. Well, thank you, all of our Patreons, for tuning in. If you're listening to this on our free feed, which we do publish these for the benefit of our guests, usually after they've been on the Patreon. If you like what you hear, go to patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. You can try us out for 7 days, get lots of great content for free, and then it's as little as $2 a month to stay on board. And we would love to have you.
Oh, I should
Yes, sir.
also mention that, by the way, I'm going to be a guest at ZakaCon in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in March.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, all of us East Coasters, New Englanders, and anybody who can drive there, make it happen. Good deal. Well, thank you again, Greg. This has been terrific.
Thank you for
And
inviting me.
you bet. We'll look forward to new of your works coming out as time goes by. Bye, everybody.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.